Why bother with the Bible? For Christians, it can be tiring trying to read it. For everyone else, it can be just as tiring talking with those who have read it. But how might we answer this question? Should Christians bother with the Bible? And should others be bothered by the Bible? There are three parts to answering this question. The first is simply, what is the Bible? The second part is about whether we can trust the Bible. Can we trust what it says about God and about us? Can we trust that what we read is what the authors originally said? Do we have the actual words of the Old Testament prophets and poets in front of us? And can we read now what Jesus and his early followers really said? And the third part follows from the second. If the Bible is trustworthy, why should we read it? Even if what is there is accurate, why does it deserve our attention? So the first question, what is the Bible? Unlike many of the books you might have read before, the Bible is a collection of little books, a mini library. In fact, it's because of its resemblance to a library that we call it the Bible, just meaning books. If you open a Bible, you'll find that each of the 66 different books within it has a name. In the Old Testament, we begin with 39 books, Genesis at the start, ending in Malachi. In the New Testament, we start with Matthew, and 27 books later, we reach Revelation. Often it can seem that there is a big difference between the God of the Old Testament, bloodthirsty, vengeful and angry, and the peaceful, loving God of the New Testament. But despite this apparent difference, the Bible is the story of one consistent creator, seeking out his creation. The whole of the Bible follows the story of God's plan to bring all nations into a relationship with him, starting with his call to Abraham in Genesis, and finishing with the words of Jesus' disciples, that whoever calls on the Lord will be saved. At the center of this plan is Jesus, God come in person to the earth. Luke's story in the New Testament is a great place to start reading a historical account of the life of Jesus. The Bible is all about God's unceasing love for his creation, to the point of a painful death, to win back those who had walked away. That's a brief overview of what the Bible is. So now we know a bit, we can ask the next question. Are we reading the right story? Has it been tampered with? Was it invented in a council by a power-hungry church looking to appease a Roman emperor? Fortunately, in comparison with other texts written around the same time, we have a lot more to go on. Amazingly, Jews and Christians were vast copiers of their own texts. Although this does not make the Bible's purpose more trustworthy, it does mean that for at least the content of the text, we have lots of physical evidence. There are enough copies of the different books in the New Testament, even before the Roman Empire endorsed Christianity, to show the large majority, if not the entirety, of each of the 27 books. So, was the message of the Bible invented by a council? Most certainly not. The Old Testament has a slightly longer gap between the message it records and its writing down. But this is not surprising, given that passing things down by memory rather than writing was preferred in that period, because at that time, not many people were able to read and write. There are some early witnesses to the Old Testament text, however, from the 2nd century BC. They were found in a desert cave, preserved in clay pots, and these are called the Dead Sea Scrolls. So considering all that, has the text been tampered with? As far as we can tell, not at all. We can say with confidence that we are reading the right story. If we know that we are reading the right story, the next question is, are we reading the story right? Why does the Bible deserve our attention? It's all very well that the text is accurate, but what relevance does it have? I would say the following things. When you read the overall message from the different books in the Bible, it becomes clear that this isn't just a story about some people, but a story for all people. The whole picture is one of God bringing the offer of eternal joy, ultimate satisfaction, and fulfilled living to whoever will listen. This offer is made in the person of Jesus. The Bible is relevant because it communicates this message, the reuniting of God and humankind. If you ever read right to the end, you will stumble on a moment where the Bible breaks the fourth wall. This is a term from drama where an actor suddenly looks and addresses the audience. It's an interesting experience because Far from being invisible spectators of something separate, you find yourself unexpectedly involved. This happens in the final chapter of the final book of the Bible, in Revelation. When reporting God's eye view, in a moment of absolute eternal bliss, the reuniting of God and his people, John writes down these words of Jesus, Erhu. That may not make sense to us because it's Greek, but in English, Jesus is saying to us, come join, don't just watch, get involved. The Bible deserves our attention because it's a message that is speaking directly to us. The message of the Bible is one that offers us a way to make a big leap from our own story to the ongoing, everlasting story of God and God's people. So how do we make the most of the Bible? The Bible can be a daunting read, and it can feel that as soon as you get started, you lose yourself in complicated laws and confusing stories. When Jesus confronts some people who have their heads buried deep in the Old Testament, he challenges their reading of the Bible. He says, you carefully study the Bible, but refuse to come to me and have life. What Jesus is saying is, these books are not about laws, they're about life. When you read the Bible, it is filled with stories and laws and prophecies and all sorts, but all of these are pointers to the perfect, abundant life with God available in Jesus. The Bible is like a beautiful glass window, looking out onto God and the perfect world to come. Although we can admire the intricate glasswork and focus on tiny bits, the real point of a window is to allow us to see clearly what lies beyond it. The Bible points to this life on offer in Jesus. The Bible is a unique, crystal clear window onto God. It shows us the hope, the joy, the amazing truth of God's rescue of us, and the fullness of life that we have in Jesus. Christian or not, the book's content should bother you. So why bother with the Bible? Because it's a record of God's character, a reminder of God's love, and a life-changing RSVP from him to us. The Bible not only speaks accurately about Jesus' life, it is speaking to us to offer us his eternal life.